Madam Chair, I rise in support of this amendment that I offered on behalf of myself, Mr. Mark Udall, Mr. Rob Bishop, Mr. Matheson, Mr. Heller, Mr. Salazar, and Ms. Musgrave. This bipartisan amendment will redirect roughly $20 million in departmental salaries and expenses to the Payment in Lieu of Taxes program to bring the total appropriation to nearly $253 million. I am pleased to be working with this bipartisan group and thank my colleagues for their support. All of us have something in common. We represent some of the 1,900 counties spread across every state but Rhode Island that have public lands that rely on the Payment in Lieu of Taxes program to mitigate the impact of the lost tax revenue resulting from federal land ownership. The federal government owns nearly 650 million acres of land, mostly in the West. We have a map here that I think we'll have up in just a moment, which shows that all the land owned or held in the trust by the government in red. If we can get that chart up here. I hesitate just a moment because I think it's important that we see exactly how much of the land in the West is owned by the federal government. In fact, as we wait just a moment to get this up here, I think it will be remarkable to recognize that as you look at the map, the amount of land owned by the federal government is amazing. I think you need to bring that a little closer here so we can actually see it. Thank you. This is an amazing amount of federal ownership and control by the federal government. That means that we do not tax those lands, and that means that the western United States, we pay less per child for education, but we tax our people more per family because we are supporting the federal government. In other words, we don't tax these lands, we tax ourselves more. As the chairman of the Western Caucus, I know all too well that my fellow colleagues in the West and throughout the West are struggling with these issues, also in many districts in the East where there's a great deal of public lands. It is only fair that we pay a reasonable amount in lieu of taxes to cover this shortfall. The Payment in Lieu of Taxes program was created in 1976 to provide payments to counties to make up for property taxes they were prevented from collecting on federal lands located within their boundaries. This year, the administration's budget proposal proposed to cut PILT by $34 million to a paltry 56% of the authorized level. The past few years have seen Congress achieve historic levels of PILT funding. We are grateful to Chairman Dix and Ranking Member Tiart for their efforts to restore PILT to the fiscal year 2007 enacted level. While the appropriation currently in the bill is significantly above the administration's recommendation, it is far from what it should be, and our counties are bearing the brunt of it. While the Department's administrative budget has nearly doubled since 2001, PILT funding levels have not kept pace, and this is not acceptable. It is imperative that we raise funding so that our rural counties won't have to continue to foot the bill for lands owned by the federal government. I urge all my colleagues to support this bipartisan amendment to bring PILT funding levels to nearly 70% of the authorized amount and support the counties that host public lands. Although I will continue to fight for full funding of PILT, this amendment is a step in the right direction and adds a modest sum to the PILT program, a sum that is important to Americans who live in public lands communities.
Will the gentleman yield?
As well as to all the visitors who visit our public lands.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman.
I rise to say that we'll be willing to accept this amendment. I do want to point out to the gentleman, though, this bill already funds PILT $43 million above the level requested by the President. And, you know, we've heard over and over again from various speakers on your side of the aisle that we have to get this bill down, not up. But this is a very important program in the West, and therefore I'm willing to accept it. But I want the gentleman to think about this in the context
reclaiming my time. I very much appreciate the gentleman's point. The fact is, this is much higher than the President's proposal. I appreciate that. And our job here is to balance how we fund these various programs and the inequity that has been perpetrated on western counties where you see these massive amounts, including in your state, of public lands that are not adequately supported by a tax base is very important. I thank the gentleman very much for his support thus far.
Will the gentleman yield?
And appreciate that.
Will the gentleman yield?
And I'm pleased to yield to the gentleman.
I want to thank the gentleman from Utah and also the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Dix, the chairman of the subcommittee, for understanding the depth of this problem. And we do need to put additional funds into PILT because the payment in lieu of taxes has created shortfalls for school systems, for local municipalities, and for counties. And I want to commend the gentleman from Utah for his effort and we have no objections to his amendment.
I thank the gentleman and urge support and yield back the balance of my time, Madam Chair.
Mr. Dix, are you withdrawing your reservation?
Yes, I withdraw my point of order.
Point of order, excuse me. The question is it. The gentleman from Utah.
I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes. What happened to the amendment?
Madam Chair, I appreciate the opportunity of just saying a word on this particular amendment. I'm also very grateful that both the ranking member as well as the chairman of the subcommittee were significant and understood the significance and importance of this particular amendment. Let me say that this is another map that's similar to the one that was already done, except this time I chose the blue color. Everything that is in blue is the amount of land owned and controlled by the federal government in each state. And you will notice that there is a proclivity of this kind of blue color in the West. Some of those that don't live in the West don't really understand what the significance or the problem is in dealing with the federal government on so much particular land. I also want you to know that this was not necessarily the way it was supposed to be. When every one of these western states entered the Union, their Enabling Act said the land would go to the federal government until such time as it shall be disposed, and each state was supposed to get a cut of the amount of money disposed by the federal government. So this was not the way it was supposed to be. But it was changed in 1970s when the Federal Land Management Policy Act was produced. And the trade-off in that was for payment in lieu of taxes. So this land would be compensated in exchange for the federal government keeping those lands without having to go back through the states to deal with it. Now, we'd actually be more happy if we had all the lands. If indeed these western states that have their lands controlled by the federal government could tax them at even the cheapest open value space, this is the amount of money that we would be able to accommodate for ourselves and solve our own problems. This bill has $232 million for payment in lieu of taxes right now. So you look at it, if Idaho simply was able to put a tax on the federal land in their state, they would create more than that money by themselves. Utah could get $116 million every year by ourselves. Nevada, $118 million every year by ourselves, and that's only for public education. It would be even more for general taxes. So the states could actually hand themselves. What I'm trying to say is I appreciate everyone finally realizing that PILT money is not freebie. It is not loans. It is simply owed to these particular states. And that our goal should not be simply the $22 million more in this particular amendment, but to fully fund PILT, which should be $375 million in the first place, or allow the states to have the flexibility to actually go after the true value of these types of lands that happen to be there. So I appreciate everyone recognizing the significance of this, and I appreciate everyone realizing that this is money that is owed to the states so that they can control and they can actually pay for the services they have to provide, even though they don't have the land resources to deal with it. And with that, Madam Chairman, I appreciate your time, and I yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The clerk will report.
Page 40, line 1.